Everybody get up, no need to cram now. We got a real jam going down, going down, going down, going down, going down, going down. Welcome to the IntelliJAMS. Here's your chance.
Always the head Alex.
Good
to see you, man.
Good to see you. Happy Monday. So
Happy
what do you want to jam on
Monday.
this week?
All right. So last time we were talking a little bit about why price testing is so hard. And we kind of ended it with a cliffhanger like idea for our next jam. So I was thinking we could do that, which is what are all the ways that you could just approach pricing and like maybe not even price test, but get some data, try and figure out how to come up with your prices. If it's not going to be price testing, then how else would I do it?
Let's do it. I think there's actually like two pieces to this. There's like, hey, how to figure out if you're going to do a price test, figuring out what you want to test, and then the actual like ways to test it. So I feel like a lot of times, like I shouldn't say a lot of times, that's going to make the market seem like just like completely, I don't know, unprepared. But you do get into a lot of conversations where someone will say to us like, hey, I've done a price test in the past, and we'll ask them like, oh, like how did you decide what price points you wanted to test? And like usually it's a word salad that ends up in like, I licked my finger, put it to the wind, and said like, oh, that feels right. I'm going to start there.
Yeah. I mean, I think that one of the things that I hear a lot is people, probably one of the most common things is like, oh, in May 2024, we changed our price from, $49 to $59. And nothing really changed. And so I think I think we clearly had pricing power. And so let's can we continue to increase price? I think so. So like, that's sort of like this word. Maybe if I were to characterize that, I would characterize that as the step change. So it's like, I make a change and I'm trying to measure or piece together before and after. So I have like some period of time right before and some period of time right after. And like the problem there is that you're not taking into account all sorts of factors. Like sometimes the opposite happens. It's like I changed my price and it tanked. And it's like, well, what are you controlling for? Are you controlling for seasonality? Are you controlling for the fact that there was a holiday? Are you controlling for the fact that, okay, I changed my prices to a higher thing, but then I immediately ran a sale because it happened to be July 4th. And it's like, oh, I didn't take that into account. You're right. Okay. So there's a lot of stuff in this sort of before after paradigm that doesn't totally work. I've seen a more and this is pretty uncommon, I would say, but I've heard of this a few times where it's like, oh, I change the prices back and forth every day for 2 weeks. Have you heard of anyone doing that?
I haven't, but that's really I was reading this book once and it was talking about how to be random, and it was about tennis players, and it was look at your watch and depending on what second it is, do that serve. It feels a little bit like that. It's like, hey, can we do some sort of randomness in a way where I have control?
Yeah. And and I've heard of people doing this also for checkout testing, where you can't really A/B test and split test your checkout, and so they'll on and off 1 page and 3 page checkout. And the problem with this is and I think checkout is maybe a little bit more of a valid approach than price, but there's 2 problems. The one, which is applicable to both the checkout and the price situation, is even though you do that, there are still going to be differences between the 2 groups. There may have been, you may sell t-shirts and it may have been really hot on Wednesday, one of those days in a large part of the country, and people were I have no good t-shirts. And so there's just factors that you're not controlling for, even though it seems random. And that also may be true for your checkout test. But then the other, which I think is more important, is well, now you're splitting it based on when people visit your site, but that means if someone comes back to your site on Monday and on Tuesday, they're going to see 2 different prices. And that's a yikes situation, especially if they can't come back on Wednesday and they see Monday prices and they're what is going on here?
That's really interesting too, because the coming back and seeing a price, because you might infer that a lower price is more motivating, but if someone saw the higher price 2 days ago and they come back and they're now seeing the lower price, are they being motivated by a price change, or did you effectively introduce a non-discount discount?
Yeah. Yeah. You're anchoring. You're like actually changing perception and behavior because you've created an anchor, which is that higher price point. Um, I've also seen people run quote unquote price tests as discounts where like, they'll be like, oh, like, you know, I was like, I wanted to test $49 or $59. So I priced it at 69 and offered some people $10 off and some people $20 off. And like maybe I did that in an email. I did like a Klaviyo A/B test. And again, the problem there is that like $20 always seems better than $10. So people aren't necessarily thinking about the shirt as like a $49 shirt or a $59 shirt. They're thinking about the like discount that they're getting, and the $20 on a $69 shirt is like a pretty incredible discount. And so now like, again, you're introducing like another dimension. You've anchored them really high. You're providing a really deep discount. Now you feel like you're getting like $49. What a steal. Whereas like if the price was just $49, maybe you wouldn't feel that way. So also like a form of anchoring that's gone wrong.
Interesting too, like the before and after situation, like things that pop into my mind is like, hey, what is your average time between purchases? Because like, hey, maybe these people who are coming back to purchase again actually started on a discount. Like maybe their first interaction was around like BFCM and like you were on like steep discounts, and like that again, like this whole concept of anchoring is like, what is the price that I'm used to paying or that I'm like most familiar seeing that is going to have a huge impact on like how I view this quote price change. Again, is it actually that I see more value in that price or I'm more motivated by that price, or is it just in comparison to what I'm most familiar with?
Yeah. Yeah. And then like maybe riffing on the comparison, there's always the like competitive angle where it's like, yeah, you know, my approach to pricing is to just like monitor my competitors. If my competitors change prices, I'm going to change my price. Or if my competitors are, you know, 55, I always want to be $4 or like I want to be like marginally above my competitors to show that I'm like premium to them. And I think like, again, it's a strategy. I don't know if it's necessarily a good strategy, but it's certainly a strategy.
When you were talking about so I think the before, you called it the before and after paradigms. Like, I think that's the most common way we probably
Yeah.
see people like instrumenting a price test. Do you usually see people do that for like one item? Do you usually see people like, hey, what if our prices were 15% lower and I'm going to like apply that across the catalog? Do people tend to like scope that, or do they kind of just be like, all right, we're doing everything because I don't want any like substitute effects or whatever?
Yeah. I don't think, I wouldn't consider this approach rigorous. And I think that it's not approached with rigor. So the kinds of questions you're asking are like, how can I create a meaningful data set, or like how can I draw meaningful insights from this action? And I don't think that that's necessarily the intention going in the first place. I think it's oftentimes like backwards looking, which is like, I spend 3 months on a pricing analysis of like, here's my costs and how they're changing and my competitors and like market surveys and whatever. Like, let me get some Ivy League business school graduate to try and like tell me what they think the price should be. I then like make that change, and now I'm going to reflect on it and wish that I had better data. So I think oftentimes it's more backwards looking. So the intentionality around data gathering and insight gathering wasn't there in the first place. And so the question like, did I look at interaction effects of different products or catalog versus product, things like that? I don't think those types of questions are even being considered. I think it's more opportunistic when we're looking backwards at a change that I made and try and triangulate the effect of that change, which quite honestly is, we've talked about, is price testing an art or a science. I would argue that that triangulation is like all art and minimal science.
There's
Not to
two
be too
interesting.
judgmental though.
Yeah, no, like no judgment here. Just like
No
share
judgment.
it,
This is
share
a
in
no
what's-
judgment.
yeah,
No
exactly.
judgment. Safe space.
Yeah, like to be honest, like caring about pricing impacts and like caring about like, hey, I'm going to make these experiments and see what happens. Like I will take that over hey, I'm just going to sit here and like hope for the best. So absolutely no judgment. Two questions that come out of what you were saying there though is like, hey, it's more backwards looking, and there might be like some analysis, or like they hired a really smart consultant or whatever that was to come in and like do this analysis to come up with like, hey, here's what we should do. Like anything you've seen for like people who are going and like putting that amount of effort in, like what do they tend to look at? And then follow-up question kind of related is like, when someone does do this kind of like backwards looking, like, okay, I have my before case and now I'm going to change this and look at after, what do you think they most often are looking at the change? Is it profit? Is it conversion? Is it revenue? Like what do they care about?
Yeah. I'll answer the second question first. So what they care about oftentimes is revenue and sales. So it's like, hey, did my sales tank? I think that like I hear e-commerce operators all the time being like, oh, yesterday was a $200,000 day. And like they're talking about sales, right? So it's like,
Yeah, top
I think
line.
a lot of times the metric that people are looking at is sales, rightly or wrongly. Obviously our perspective is profit is important. But I think it's easy, and that what Shopify is reporting on number one metric at the top of the dashboard is sales. So I think that Shopify is anchoring people, and also it's sort of like what is the comfortable nomenclature. Going back to the first question about what are the factors that people consider? I don't know that everyone considers all three, but I think there are three. I often think about them as a triangle because they like are connected, but they're different sort of points along this triangle. Number one is competitors. And so like, how do I want to price relative to my competitors? Number two is cost plus. So like, what are my margins that I'm shooting for? And what are my COGS? And so like, hey, I want 75% gross margins. So like $20 COGS means that I need $80 unit price. And then the third is perceived value. And like, that's harder to get at. I would argue that A/B testing is like one of the best ways to get at that. But a lot of times it's surveys or even anecdotes, just talking to people. Would you be willing to pay $80 for this? Like, how much would you be willing to pay for this? And trying to collect some of that. So, and then I draw this as a triangle because they're trying to triangulate between what people say they're willing to pay, what it's costing you, and where your competitors are at. And so like, in a great situation without other data, your competitors are the same as your target cost plus price, which is, less than or about the same as what people say they're willing to pay. And like, now you've triangulated fantastic. Otherwise you kind of have to like sort of move towards one corner of that triangle. But those tend to be the three that I think people look at most.
This is really interesting because the last jam that was like inspiring this jam was, hey, how do you like implement a price test?
Yeah.
And right now it's like, hey, how do you think about how to price? And like, I think what's coming out of this for me is like, hey, you can go and do these things. You can go and do this research. But the biggest, I think last time I was trying to like showcase like, hey, how easy is it to set up a price test with IntelliJAMS versus doing it a different way? Trumping all of that is the understanding that you're going to have facilitating the test and being able to like look at all the data and like see how these things are interacting with each other. Cause like even in your triangle example, it's like looking at my competition, I have zero insight into whether my competitors are selling well or not. That's not true. You're going to have some, but like they're priced at this, but like, are they winning at that price or are they losing and wishing that they were priced more like you?
And also it's hard. You're projecting your own beliefs about the difference between you and your competitor, which is obviously like a bit jaded. I think that, when it goes to price testing, this is a very good measure of value and how much are people willing to pay. And that's just like, we can get that strictly when looking at conversion rate as part of this A/B test is how much value do people perceive and how much are they willing to pay? And then by incorporating all your COGS, we can also like pull that factor in. So I think that like there's a lot of much better data generation here along what I would argue are more important points of the curve than like, hey, I like, I'm going to look left and look right at the people next to me on the shelves and try and like price near them.
even on the perceived value front, like perceived value through surveying is one thing, but like actually setting a few different price points and like seeing what that perceived value is on like an actual elasticity curve versus
Right.
like, yo, Adam, you willing to pay $8 for this? And you're like, yeah, sure. And then you actually see an $8 item, you're like, nah, like I'm not gonna. Like, you actually have to vote with your wallet here. It's one thing to say you're going to do something; it's another thing to do it. And that's the marketer in me just being like super jaded about surveying.
Oh yeah. Surveys are the worst. Don't trust survey data. And I'm happy to end it right there. Don't trust survey data.